Yes, thank you very much, Chitrangada and Aniket, for this. I don't know what to say. Maybe I was thinking we'll start with Vasavi, and who can begin with giving us a larger context of the agrarian crisis in the country, leading to why Dr. Debal's work becomes even more important, why it's necessary. And then we can come into Chitrangada and Aniket.
Thank you, Sushma, for organizing this, and to Vikalp. I'd like to congratulate my friends, both Chitra and Aniket, for this very fine, nuanced documentary, which I know has taken them many years to make, because they've been visiting this area for many years. And it's only because they've had built a very good relationship with many of these people that they've been able to represent these very difficult issues in this very sensitive way. Having said that, if you may have noticed, the subtitle of the film was The Questions of Sustainability. And of course, there's a range of questions about sustainability, but here in the context of seeds, there are two major questions that I think the world faces, not just India, is what were seeds and what have seeds become now? Seeds were really, as the film highlights so well, seeds were the wealth, shared wealth of agrarian communities, of people who cultivated them, who evolved with them, for whom seeds were repositories of their knowledge, but also were very strongly linked to their identity and their way of life, and also, because the seeds became the part of their food cultures. What have seeds become? Increasingly, seeds have become goods, commodities bought and sold in the market, and increasingly defined, directed by big corporate companies. As you know, world over, from thousands of seed varieties, there are now only very, very few seed varieties which are controlled and managed and profited by big multinational companies. So this broadly is the framework in which SeedStories tells us what is happening in this small part of India, once very marginalized, but increasingly what you see is the intrusion of the larger, this big corporate agribusiness system intruding into these marginalized areas and changing their cultivation patterns. It's in this context that we see the extent to which remote, what were called highly diverse but marginalized areas, cultivation or agricultural systems were based on evolved systems which were suitable to the local ecologies, which Dr. Deb highlights very specifically as very suitable to specific habitats itself, and adapted to those habitats for extreme different types of climates, different types of soils, etc. But in which were also became part of not only the food systems but also of their cultures, and which had inbuilt resilience to them. But what we are seeing, especially over the past 2 decades in India, it's the intrusion of the larger, not only corporate system, but linked to a very complex, what we call a financial regime, in which intruding into these areas, there is an erosion of traditional, local, evolved systems into becoming monocultures, especially for commercialized crops, in this case, which is cotton. Even as we are seeing cotton belts in the traditional areas, say southern India, middle India, being reduced and shifting to other kinds of crops, it's into these interior areas where local diverse crops are being displaced and monocultivation of commercial crops are being promoted, and therefore the seeds are coming from corporate groups along with a set of inputs which are chemical inputs which you've seen. For example, the most extreme now we are seeing is herbicide, banned in most parts of the world, but being promoted in these remote areas, mostly because these people don't have the know-how or the power to question such dangerous inputs into their lives. So having said that, I want to just briefly also comment on the importance of Dr. Debal Deb's work. Very important, what you see is in Vasudha Farms is not just a farm with this diversity, this basket of very rich basket of rice varieties that he has cultivated, promoted, shared, and is supporting, not only that, but promoting it as scientifically valid. This is an example of the extent to which dominant establishment science sees agriculture as being promoted from the lab to the land. But in this case, what you see Dr. Debal Deb doing is promoting and sustaining diversity and nuanced evolved systems from the land towards the lab. So he's published very sophisticated papers questioning mainstream science that disregards diversity, that disregards and erodes local people's knowledge systems. But also in many ways what he's trying to show is, given the context of what you saw in the film, devastating with global warming taking place, where you have extreme events of sudden rainfall, etc. It is local evolved seeds that can withstand this, but not these chemicalized seeds that are being promoted in these areas. Dr. Deb's work is also important for marginal areas and for sustaining diversities of seeds and local cultivation practices, because mainstream science now is increasingly under the dominance of big corporate profit-oriented capital itself. We are seeing the extent to which in India decisions on agriculture, especially seeds, because seeds are seen as the most profit-making commodities, decisions are made behind closed doors. Just last week, the government of India has signed deals in which 2 types of new kinds of herbicide-resistant rice varieties are going to be promoted across India. So there is disregard not only for ecology, but of people's health, but also about the incomes of very average farmers, given the fact that 86% of our farmers, that is, which is about 60% of the population, have holdings which are average size is only 1.15 hectares, literally handkerchief-sized plots. So what we are looking at are big, large macro systems eroding into marginal areas and devastating the livelihoods of small marginal farmers, with tremendous implications for our sustainability. So it's in this context and with, that the seed stories require us to think within this larger frame, to question this larger frame, in which we must look at agriculture as supporting diversity, diversity of cultivation, diversity of seeds and of practices, being democratic, and more primarily becoming decentralized and not centralized into corporate or just simply even state-based systems. So with this, I'd like to thank all of you for coming here, and also I'd like to congratulate all 3 of them for this very fine film. Thank you again.
Thank you, Vasavi. Maybe then now we go to find out a little more about how the film came into being. I mean, did it begin with Dr. Deb, or did you?
Thank you everyone for coming, and a slight apology. We had problems with the project and we really tried to fix it. As you see in the film, the Niyamgiri landscape is a character in itself, and we really wanted that to come across, but I still hope the film worked. And I would also like to thank Vikalp Bengaluru for creating the space for documentary films since 2005. I think the documentary film tradition in India is a really important tradition, which is now also under attack, like so many other sort of independent-minded work, and that's why spaces like Vikalp Bengaluru and Prithvi are so important. My background is as a newspaper journalist, and in 2014, the newspaper Lounge, Mint Lounge, and a shout out to my editor Priya, who's here, and who's the first editor of that newspaper. They were doing an Independence Day special issue, and the brief was to find Indians who are interpreting independence and freedom in interesting ways, and that's how I ended up doing a piece on Debal Deb and going in 2014 to Vasudha Farm. and have been covering environment since a while. And Aniket's work is as an anthropologist of Maharashtra looking at the GM debate. And then we started working with Debal Deb as volunteers on his farm. It's a really tiny farm run with, it's entirely a labor of love, and I really feel in any other country, like he would get so much more support and credit for the work that he and a small team of Dalalda and Sabatari are doing. So anyway, we were volunteering on that farm, and even as we were doing this work, and seeing what Debal Deb is doing this work, and as you see through the character of Kunuji, this is a region which is rich in agroecological knowledge, even though mainstream media narratives and mainstream policy narratives always portray these areas as backward, and people like Kunuji as, you know, backward people who need to be brought into the mainstream of development and brought into progress. So the area was rapidly changing with the coming of these seeds, and as you see in the film, these seeds just don't grow without these bunch of inputs, so it's a very deadly package. And so in a way, it's a story of this one village, but it's also a story of global capitalism and what global capitalism is doing to agriculture, because all over the world, agriculture is becoming a chemical-intensive monocrop. So there's a lot of pieces, if I'm right, Debal Deb, on you and his work, but I think just this contrast of him trying to save these seeds, and he frankly says it, and he'll probably tell you also now, he often feels like, you know, I'm not going to save these seeds from death, I'm probably just pushing their extinction by a few years. That's all I will be able to do. So the poignancy of him doing that work and his team doing that work while the area around is so rapidly and irreversibly changing. And if we go back in the tradition of anthropology and shoot there again after 15, 20 years, figures like Kunuji will not be there. So I think the film almost came along accidentally. We just wanted to visually chronicle that landscape and the changes it was going through, people like Kunuji, Debal Deb's work, and then the coming of this kind of seeds, first by the Odisha government in the 90s, but now in a much more brutal and irreversible way through big agribusiness. So that's how the film came about, essentially.
So, I mean, you talk about the cotton came in the last 16 years. Is that what I read? Right. So did it come along with the mining that kind of came into the Niyamgiri landscape, or maybe you want to say a little?
Just on the mining question, I mean, actually even this village is, it's very close to the Vedanta mine, and we don't show it, but the paramilitary do come here often on combing operations, and again we understand, and that kind of that forest grab or that land grab or the mine has now been successfully resisted for almost 20 years at a heavy cost, of course, to the Dongriya Kon people who are resisting it. And that is understood as dispossession. We see it as dispossession and violence, and they also see it as dispossession. But the coming of these kind of seeds and the chemicals is sort of fundamentally rewriting people's relationship to the land, to ecology, to their own knowledge, to their own resources, which enable a certain kind of sovereignty. And they get maybe a few thousand rupees out of it, and they do not see it as dispossession because they're coming into these global supply chains of cotton on very precarious and vulnerable terms, but with the hope of making some profit. But in the long run, it will probably be a much more slow and insidious form of dispossession.
I think in that context, because you mentioned you have done a lot of work in agroecological economics. You do focus quite a bit on it. So can you elaborate a little more about why it is very necessary to talk about economics when you're talking about sustainability and conservation?
First of all, I should know, before I explain this, I'm really grateful to these two filmmakers. They're great friends of mine today over the last decade. And especially for making me a film actor from a farmer. So, for which I was never prepared for this. But I take this opportunity of, I really am interested in attending these ones because this is an opportunity where I can share my ideas and learn from the audience also. There are so many valuable inputs from the friends, and I'm very proud to have in many of my very old friends from IISc days here as well. So with this introduction, so I'm just sharing with this, according to your question, the the crux of all this activity of conservation of crop genetic diversity is sovereignty, farmers' sovereignty. So the farmers' sovereignty was not even in the British period. The farmers' sovereignty was not lost. As Marx once said, that despite the changes of dynasty over thousands of years in Indian history, the farmers remained sovereign to their land rights, especially with the cultivation style and everything. Whether it was Pathan, Mughal, and all of these, British period also, the decision as to which type of seed and which type of cultivation method would be followed was not changed in a major way, excepting the forced cultivation of indigo in Bengal or opium in UP and all of these. But the style of cultivation, the choice of seeds, and the local market that actually fixed the price was largely unchanged over millennia. This has abruptly changed, and the historical landmark is the Green Revolution, which has abruptly changed. And perhaps you all know that the seed market, the business of seed as a commodity to be sold and bought from the market, began in the 1960s with the advent of the Green Revolution. Until that time, there was no seed market per se. So India used to export basmati to Roman Empire. And the Portuguese sailors actually brought this potato and chili. I mean, we can't imagine that chili was not Indian anyway, in Indian cuisine. But it all came from South America with the European sailors, especially Portuguese sailors. So that's why we still name these, the Portuguese names, batata and ananas and all of these. But there was no seed trade that way. There was no seed company, no Portuguese company or a Brazilian company selling chili seeds, selling pineapple seeds, or even European countries selling cabbage and cauliflower seeds and so on. It's all open exchange. There was trade, but not a kind of proprietary business, which began only in the 1960s with the advent of the Green Revolution, and that changed the entire landscape of agricultural economics and agriculture itself. Agriculture itself was changed. To that extent, when we lose at that micro level the sovereignty of the farmer on his or her own farm level, at the macro level, we are also losing sovereignty of the nation, the country as well. We have to depend on the supply of all these seeds and other materials of production on certain external agencies. We have heard about this, the India has become, because of the Green Revolution, and now we are thinking of second Green Revolution, deeper Green Revolution, and all of these, intense Green Revolution, doubly Green Revolution, all these kind of things where there's brouhaha about the Green Revolution and this. And because people, especially the urban educated elite, consider that Green Revolution has ensured our food security, we are sustainable in our food. Earlier we used to import, but now we are exporting this. Exporting what? We used to export lentil. We used to export mustard oil to different parts of the world. Now we are importing mustard oil. Can you believe which country? And lentil was typically Indian. It originated in India, it was cultivated in India, and now we are importing all the way from Canada. Canada is the largest exporter of lentil to India. Australia is the largest exporter of basmati rice. Check up this. Where is exporting? Now, we are sustainable, self-sustainable in rice, etc., and wheat, etc. At the expense of this, the import of all the other things. At the micro level, the traditional farmer used to cultivate rice and millets and oil seeds and the lentils and all the beans, all of these, dal, for example, and the vegetables around the year. Today, it's rice after rice after rice, or wheat after wheat after wheat in Punjab, for example, and everything is bought from the market at the micro level. at exactly the same level, same story for the macro level, at the national level. We are not importing, apparently not importing rice, but we are importing mustard oil, palm oil. Now mustard oil is no longer grown. Now we are importing palm oil, which was never in our culture. We are importing soybean oil, which was never in our culture. So we are changing our food culture. We are changing our taste. We are adapting ourselves to those market demands at the expense of all of this sovereignty and sustainability. In Bengal, perhaps you are aware that Bengal is very famous for a large sweet tooth. Every Bengali is fond of sweets, rasagulla and all of this. We have, perhaps you are aware of the Kesidas. Yeah. So there's one local, I always make this kind of analogy, a local sweet maker in Bengal somewhere, making rasagulla, okay, this cottage cheese fried in sugar syrup. And this sweet maker says that I am self-sufficient in rasagulla and curd, doi. I am self-sufficient. Only the milk and sugar I have to buy from outside. This is exactly the situation of Indian food sustainability and sovereignty. We have every seed is coming from Philippines, IR8, IR36, IR72, and all of these. Every agrochemical, with urea, DAP, superphosphate, and this regime of 20 years ago, this government has declared that all the phosphate should come from Europe. Now there is no even rock phosphate business is off now in India. No production of phosphate, superphosphate. And pesticides are all coming from either Germany or USA or France. DuPont, Bayer, Monsanto, and all of these. Now there are herbicides also from Monsanto. You already saw this. And pump sets, when the Green Revolution started, that was the 1960s when we were school students, we saw the pump set was Tulu pump. That was Japanese. Then Kirloskar, the British. Now it's all Chinese pumps. Okay. So even the pump set is not manufactured in India. So every equipment, all the modes of production, seed and the materials of production, means of production, all from outside, just like the sweet maker here, we are sustainable in, self-sufficient in rasagulla making. So this is the situation, and that actually, as an ecologist, I could see this, it was not just a question of botany. It's not the question of this genetic integrity of this, but the question of livelihood. I cannot myself eat sufficiently to my choice, the satisfaction of the choice, and to the satisfaction of my own indigenous culture, the food culture, unless we make sure that the sovereignty is resting. That's the crux of all of these conservation movements. Without that, we have no escape.
Yeah, maybe this is a good time to kind of go to the audience, and if there are any questions that you would like to ask the filmmaker, because, as much as it is about conservation, this is a film that has brought the whole idea together in a visual medium. So, any questions in the audience about, please go ahead.
Congratulations to the filmmakers and Dr. Debal and the Adivasis that have sort of stayed the course. My name is Vishwa Satka. I'm from South Africa. I'm an academic. I'm working on climate famines at the moment. But I'm also a food sovereignty activist. Excuse me. I'm just struck by, in your narrative, you really kind of highlight the sort of ecocidal logic of this green revolution since the 60s. And it's not just wiping out biodiversity and seed and culture and people. It's actually wiping out the commons. It seems to be the certain historical specificity about this, the last greatest possession of the commons. But I'm here because I'm also come to learn from the natural farming movement in Andhra Pradesh. And there's about 1 million of them really taking agroecology to the next level. And I think that's something I'm grappling with. I'm sure there's been other attempts to push back against the green revolution. And I think that's where my question is leading. You mentioned sort of traditional farming as one way out as well. But don't you think also this mono-industrial system is coming up against its limits? Climate change is already inducing collapses. Madagascar, where I come from, has had a climate famine in 2021. Most of the world doesn't know this. The entire industrial food system has its own pathologies that are eating itself up. And you already have headlines in India about yields dropping dramatically as climate change worsens, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what I'm getting at is maybe climate change is also going to make the case to move beyond this and maybe give impetus to some of these alternatives to come back. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
This is for the filmmaker.
I mean, if someone wants to add to that, by all means, I will be very brief. One is that I agree with what you're saying about the empirical reality. I'm not so sure that therefore any lessons are being learned at the policy level. If yields are dropping, let's do genetic modification. If genetic modification is controversial, let's do genome editing. Climate smart agriculture is one of the richest fields of venture capitalism in India as of today. And secondly, to have a climate resilient agriculture, you need access to biodiversity and access to the kind of knowledge systems that farmers like Kunuji possess. And simply because we cannot, once biodiversity is lost, it cannot be conjured up at will. And it cannot be extracted in a cultivable form from seed banks in Scandinavia. There is something like being too late. We end by saying that Kunuji is one of the last agroecological farmers in the region. We sincerely hope we are wrong. But if indeed that is true, and even if someone comes to Debal Deb and accepts all these seed varieties but does not know how to cultivate them,
I don't know if you get the Hindu, and today the Hindu, the main jacket advertisement is the full-page Punjab government advertisement with a big picture of the chief minister sort of with folded hands asking the farmers to diversify. I mean, this is where the state historically got farmers to cultivate specific varieties of 2 Green Revolution crops. And in areas like Odisha or other, particularly Adivasi landscapes, I mean, Debal Deb makes this point repeatedly that the areas where biodiversity has survived, and this is not just true of India, it's around the world, where biodiversity has survived is where indigenous communities are. So areas like this where there is diversity, there is a knowledge of polycropping, you're pushing them towards monocropping. I mean, these herbicides are so dangerous because they destroy the foundational pillar of agroecology, which is polycropping. So I agree with you that there is pushback, but there are also these great forces which are rapidly, I mean, we shot this, that scene of that village retailer who's again a young Adivasi man. We had to blur his face because what he's doing is actually illegal. He doesn't have the license to sell such toxic chemicals. But now, like in these 3 years, his business has gone up almost 10 times. And the government knows it. It's not that the Odisha government doesn't know what's happening. But it's literally sort of making, overlooking it and allowing companies such a free reign of such a biodiverse and eco-sensitive landscape. So where will those resources come from? Even if tomorrow we wake up, it's not that we are showing any signs of waking up and we're assailed with like every day the newspaper is full of some climate disaster event. But we're not really looking at the deeper phenomena, right?
In that context, Chitrangada, how much does a film, I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, how much does a film like this, do you think, kind of pushes the dialogue? And where do you think?
If it makes the audience think, I guess that's all.
I'm sorry, I will add one thing to it. It's certainly, we have written about this, and we have also noted that even in translation, it doesn't travel far. So, and we are also looking to raise funds because we want to do this we want to put voiceovers in different regional Indian languages and take it to rural areas. I would love my farmer informants in Maharashtra to see this agriculture, because Maharashtra, in at least the part where I have done my research in, this kind of agriculture simply does not exist there anymore. And secondly, sorry, there's no second.
There was a question. Someone in the back?
Hi. Wow, that delay is a little bit disconcerting. I am Niranjan. I'm a climate activist and filmmaker as well, and I may stumble a little bit.
Can you speak a little louder? We can't hear.
Sure, yeah. I may stumble a little bit because you've given me a lot to think about. So the question that I really want to ask is, I know the potent nature of what film can do.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear? Okay. I know the...
You have to hold the mic a little.
To the other side? Yeah, sure. So I know the potent nature of what film can do, right? And I want to understand you've already covered the ideas about biodiversity and indigenous cultures being super important to preserve the longevity of literally our existence. What I want to know is, if you were to take film, or if not film, what would be the ideal medium or the evolution that you guys have seen, to push film? Because film it covers research, it covers reading, it covers music, it covers audio and visual, all of this in like a very seamless manner. I guess I want to know how do you see the evolution of film craft in telling stories like this that are that reinforce the idea generation to generation, and not just between your generation to my generation, for example, right? Even you guys, I can sense that you are scared, and that you are feeling a little bit desolate, right? I can sense that in the film, I can sense that in your conversation, and I feel that myself. So that's my question. How do you, what do you see film evolving into, especially documentary or otherwise, that would help transfer knowledge, this kind of knowledge, specific, technical, highly sort of volatile knowledge across generations? Thank you.
I'm not sure I understood the question entirely, but we're obviously showing it on, and we would certainly like to show it much more in colleges and to younger people. And as Aniket said, we're also now working on various translations. We'd like to show it much more to rural audiences. Our editor Ajay TG is not here anymore, but those of you who've seen his work, he's this Chhattisgarh-based filmmaker. He has this great tradition where he just goes around with his film and and a white screen, and he shows it in villages. So broadly, for example, right now the film is mostly in Oriya and Kui. Just the parts where Debal Deb speaks is in English, and some of what he says is quite technical and specific, but we're doing sort of Oriya voiceovers for that now, and would certainly like to work with environmental movements in the Niyamgiri to screen it, because as you see from the film, the only frontier that is now left is the Dongriya Kond villages. Sort of BT cotton is now encroaching there, but once it comes there, that's sort of the last frontier breach. So we'd certainly like to work with movements to show it there. So I think film, and especially like I mentioned in the opening remarks, I think the whole documentary film tradition in India, and particularly environmental films, there have been such great films on not just agriculture, but also forests, dams, and so on. They've always sparked conversations and made people think about issues, and I think we're just working within this broader tradition.
Very good evening, sir. Myself, Vignesh from Tamil Nadu. I have one question related to greenwashing, sir. Today's greenwashing is increasing very much, sir. How it disrupts our sustainable projects and measures?
Sorry, could you
was not.
Greenwashing means
Greenwashing. Yeah.
by the way of promoting sustainable projects, they promote mainly capitalistic way of developments like that.
Oh, yes.
How it affects sustainable measures, sir, actually.
The greenwashing is a tactics of advertisement by those toxic chemicals. For example, DuPont. DuPont is one of the three largest companies which are causing the greenhouse gas emission and CFC, etc., etc. And in the biggest advertisement by DuPont is that for the cleaner sky, this was a beautiful image of a blue sky with no flecks of white cirrus clouds, and DuPont is for that. But DuPont is the one of the three culprits of the world who actually destroys this, the biggest production of CFC and HCFC and all of these things. So this is definitely a kind of thing. And Monsanto is life science company, and it says that chemical is fine because life is made of chemicals. This is their advertisement language. So what's wrong with life? If you are opposing chemicals, you are opposing life. So that's the type of things. And I've seen it's not just the chemicals, but also the elite environmentalists in universities too, because I've seen all the three worlds of this academia, farm, and the activism, these three worlds. I've seen many academics who are promoting this. What's wrong with genetic engineering? Everything has genes. All the organisms have genes. What's wrong with one gene incorporated in that? So my answer was, I agree with that. Why should anyone oppose atomic bomb? Because everything has atoms. So that's the kind of logic that they give it. And it's really confusing many of those people, especially the farmers. And they don't care for this, the mechanisms of this, what's the chemistry behind it, how this chemistry impacts the other rest, life's chemistry and all of this. Glyphosate, for example, the herbicide, is not only the case that it eradicates the so-called weeds. I mean, there's a more fundamental question is what weed is, what is weed? Ralph Waldo Emerson, in one of his last lectures, said that weed is the plant whose virtue is yet unknown. The moment you know this virtue, it's no longer a weed. Okay? Now, weed is a completely relative term. A farmer who considers weed in a rice farm, some vegetables, okay, is a weed. But the vegetable farmer who's growing that vegetable, he considers rice growing in that vegetable farm as a weed. Now, how can the chemical identify which weed is it? Which one to eradicate? It's totally decided by the farmer, unwanted one. But anyway, glyphosate particularly is not only the case that it eradicates the plants, any plant, as you saw in this film. The same farmer was saying, no, you cannot apply to the rice because it will kill off the rice. And it eradicates all of this. So those are not really weeds. But the more fundamental thing is that the glyphosate particularly is, perhaps you should all know, that this is the only toxin in human civilization ever invented which has absolutely no resistance in any organism evolved. Every organism, every chemical that humans have manufactured, whether it is DDT or PCB or whatever, human systems or animal systems have reacted to it. There are some resistance to it, some deleterious, but some kind of resistance, of course. Glyphosate is the only toxin which has no resistance at all, chemically, biochemically. Simply because the structure of the glyphosate molecule is very similar to the atomic structure, the molecular structure of glycine, one of the essential amino acid. So when you consume glyphosate molecule in one part of your food, which is bound to come, the moment you spray glyphosate in your mustard oil or lentil, every cell in that food, including the seed and this, the seed extract, that extracts the oil, so the oil itself, you are bound to consume that molecule in your food, okay? Because it's a systemic one. It's absorbed by the plant and it's stored in every cell of the plant. So when you eat this lentil or mustard seed or whatever, or rice, you are consuming that. And the moment you consume it, the cell in your body, or every cell in your body, does not consider it as a toxin because it's similar to glycine, which is an essential amino acid, and therefore, in the process of protein formation, I mean, for the non-technical people, it's this protein is a chain of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks. So amino acids have chain-like structure, hook-like structure. So it's hooked on to the next amino acid, and so on. Finally, it forms a chain of amino acids, which is called protein. And any protein of the body, whether it's insulin, your retina, your keratin in your hair, nail, everything is a protein. Now, the moment it starts building, instead of one glycine, you get one glyphosate molecule in that one. And that moment, the chain formation is stopped. Because unlike glycine or any other amino acid is one end is amine, another is acid. So there's a chain-like thing. So on one side, it will hook on amine group, another is acid group. But glyphosate is not an amino acid, therefore it has the amine group, but not the acid group, and therefore it stops there. The result is disastrous. When you are manufacturing insulin in your body, in the halfway of this you get one molecule of glyphosate incorporated into that chain, and it abrupts the ends there. So, although you are very healthy, you have perfect genes, perfect environment, all the chemicals necessary to manufacture insulin in your pancreas, you cannot manufacture this entire insulin molecule because it's truncated unpredictably. And this is one single most important reason why all over the world, just focus on India, there is an epidemic of non-inherited diabetes. Okay? It's not inherited. You will find even childhood diabetes. In the entire genealogy of the family, there was nobody was suffering from diabetes, but this child has the diabetes. Or this, even at the age of 30 or 40, suddenly this individual contracts diabetes. It's mainly because of glyphosate. You consume glyphosate, and at some point of time, when that has interfered into this manufacturing of this. And there is just one example. Bone, the postmenopausal problem is the osteoporosis. Now, osteoporosis is now also found among men. Umpteen number of records in the medical colleges. Women below menopausal age. Even children have this brittle bone syndrome. It's called brittle bone syndrome. And this is, again, in Argentina, it's been actually pinpointed that this is glyphosate alone which is responsible. Because the bone formation, once this glyphosate comes, it's incomplete formation. So the protein is not manufactured, even if you are genetically and medically totally healthy, because of this one. So this one is not known to any farmer who's doing it. It's not known to consumers who are consuming it. But the scientists know, Monsanto knew it, and perhaps you are aware that 8 years ago, Monsanto had to state in the Supreme Court of USA and to the USDA that yes, they lied and they suppressed this effect. It was very much well known. In their own documents, it was proven that they already knew it before they marketed it. But they suppressed it, and in this suppression, this was actually in collusion with FDA, Food and Drug Administration of the USA. So it was in collusion. And then there was lots of argument that which showed that the FDA there's a revolving door between FDA and Monsanto. People, the same individual, same officer from Monsanto with the revolving door goes to FDA, occupy a position, and then a retired FDA comes to Monsanto. And I'm not going to say what exactly is happening in India, because at least FDA, it was highlighted, they were punished, they were documented. Nothing was of this sort happens here. Although I know individually, personally I know some of the individuals, but I'm bound not to mention their names because I don't have the document to prove in the court of law. So because of this, millions and millions of people are the victims. the victims of this slow poisoning and slow killing of all this population. This is where can we dream of sustainability if the entire administration and the food producing agencies and the regulators of the food production itself, the agriculture ministry, agricultural instruments, agricultural laboratories, universities of agriculture are all party to this. And I can name with a very few exceptions, every single agriculture university is funded by these agrochemical companies. Monsanto, Syngenta, Mexico, DuPont, you name it.
Yeah, in fact,
how can they publish anything that goes against them?
In fact, all the cotton research funding is coming from them. So there is no independent research that is happening
Even
in the university.
IISc has a Monsanto's laboratory of advanced biotechnology. And the students from biotechnology, from IISc and other places, they get appointed to Monsanto's biotech laboratory. And even if they know that this is really disastrous, how can they publish it? They have no right to publish it without their permission. Not only the students and the slaves, but also the independent scientists, me included. I personally had to fill up 30-page document from Monsanto as an agreement in order to study Monsanto's BT cotton, for example. Okay. But the last page I couldn't sign, and therefore I never went into the agreement. This last page says that I cannot publish any of these findings unless I get approved from the manuscript by the Monsanto office. So unless Monsanto approves, yes, it's publishable, only then I can publish it. And this is the reason hundreds of scientists who have studied, who are willing to study these kind of effects, but they cannot publish it because this is a 30-page document of this. They cannot. And this became a topic, the subject of a special issue of Scientific American is seeds, it's seed research controlled by biotech companies. That was the heading of the special issue. And 12 scientists actually said that we simply are unable to publish it because we can't. If we publish it without their permission, we have to pay a hefty kind of, something like $30 million or $40 million as punishment. Who is going to publish it? And therefore, the argument is that GM crops are bad, there's no evidence. That's why they're able to say that there's no evidence, because you cannot procure any evidence. It's another philosophical thing to say that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence of effects.
Perhaps we can collect some questions, since I think we are running out of...
One thing, so what I missed in the film was the market. Clearly, if there has been a 5,000% increase in the cotton cultivation in that region, there clearly is a very easily accessible market for all these farmers. So we didn't see the market in the film. So who is buying the cotton? Clearly there is somebody, the market is coming to their doorstep, right? To the farmer's doorstep. So did you see them?
You mean the market for the cotton? Yeah. So actually, again, this is what I said earlier about the farmers being reduced, and this is a point which Dulalda also makes, being reduced to sort of one input. Their labor becomes one input in this larger global chain. They are buying on credit, as you see on the film. Many of them are buying on credit, and then when do they pay back? They pay it back at harvest time, and they sell back to that same retailer, who then sort of looks at what it is, usurious, how much is he going to charge. And so this is why also it's so much of a gamble, whether they will make any money or not at the end of the season. So essentially, the market is coming through the seeds and the chemicals, and then they're sort of reduced to labor on their own land, and they're selling back the finished product, which is the cotton, again through the same retailers. So for example, this young man whose face we blurred, he takes all the cotton back from them, makes some calculation, says, oh, you've got only this much. The woman who said, I will get maybe only 8,000 after the rain destroyed her crop, she owed that retailer more than 10,000 rupees. And the other point is actually, I don't know if you can speak a bit to this about cotton farmers in Maharashtra, but over here, if you start asking them questions about economics, this is also one of the first generations who are actually going and buying seeds and buying inputs. So it is also a historically new experience for them. So if you actually ask them, are you making profit or loss, it's very hard to get specific answers about that.
No, in fact, in Karnataka, the few farmers that I have interacted with, they say we'd rather kind of commit suicide. We'd rather commit suicide before we start doing the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just to that we showed this film in Delhi 2 days ago. So Yogendra Yadav was there in the audience, and he said, I mean, I'll say it in Hindi and then translate it in English. He said, "Agar kisan hisab karna shuru karega, to kisan hi chhod dega." If farmers start doing economics and calculating, they'll give up farming because it's such a losing and such a proposition of gamble now.
Questions for the audience?
Let's collect a couple. Let's collect 3-4 maybe.
Okay, I have.
Yeah.
So my question may seem a little naive because we've been hearing these stories about farmer suicides for 20 years, right? Like we know how dire the situation is. And on the other hand, we've always seen the tribals of Odisha fighting like the mining companies and being a very aware kind of tribals and who've, had the strength to take on kind of big mining giants in Bapli, Malli, Niyamgiri. So I'm wondering how come this news of just how vile and evil BT cotton is not traveling to these people? Like, how is it that in more recent years they're shifting to cotton? Like, I would think that by now everybody would be scared, all farmers would be scared of growing cotton. Like,
Should we collect?
I mean, more than 99% of cotton in India is BT cotton. Farmers are not scared, and it's also they have now entered into the system from where they see no exit.
I think we'll just collect some questions.
Become contentious. There is no access to the diversity that is also there.
No, I mean, I think it is important to point out that none of these seeds are marketed as even BT cotton or HT cotton. I mean, if you saw some of the packets we showed, there is no information. There's not even who's manufactured them. These are entirely grey market seeds. And they are coming through a supply chain. It's very important to remember, and this is also why the film medium is important. Most people would not recognize people like Kunuji as farmers.
In Maharashtra, there are so many suicides. Have farmers there given it up? In families where there have been suicides, they are not able to give it up.
But perhaps you noticed one very important thing is that BT cotton, it's mentioning BT cotton, which is not herbicide tolerant at all. And from the history of BT cotton in India in 99 onwards, there was no question of herbicide tolerance at all. Yeah. In these packets too, they don't mention it's herbicide tolerant because herbicide tolerant crop is banned in India. It's against law. And therefore, none of the packets mention it's herbicide tolerant. But in de facto, you cannot grow this cotton without herbicides. Okay? And this is totally illegal, and it's under the nose of every government. It's being promoted. You cannot nab any company because the manufacturing company's name is not printed there. Okay? It's not even mentioned it's herbicide tolerant. It's only BT cotton. You don't even know whether it's really BT or not. It could be ordinary cotton, genetically modified only for glyphosate tolerance. That's all. So all this gamut is now going on. This is not agriculture. It's simply politics and commerce.
I suppose the answer to your question is that I don't think it's the question. We cannot pin it on what farmers know and don't know. There's a structure which keeps them vulnerable to this kind of almost fraud.
Can we just take questions?
Yeah. So the thing about herbicide resistant plants, that is understood, but do you think that with the growing population or we need crops which can give us more yield? With rising sea level, we need crops which are salinity stress resistant or crops which require less water to grow. So for that, do we only depend on the indigenous seeds or biodiversity and their ability to naturally adapt, or do we really need a little boost by the genome editing techniques and all? So what is your opinion about that?
First of all, I wanted to thank Chitrangada and Aniket for an excellent film and for going beyond just Deval's farm, which itself could be the subject for a couple of hours long documentary, if not more. But sort of contrasting that with what else is happening in that landscape is really very fascinating. And Deval, of course, for his work that we have known for such a long time. I wanted to ask this question to Deval. The contrast in the film between you conserving paddy varieties and Kunuji growing a whole bunch of other crops like pulses and millets and so on. So are you planning to then set up a conservatory for millets and pulses also was my question.
Thank you. It was a lovely film to watch despite the, kind of really deep, tragic story behind it. I just wanted to say that there are multiple stories. And I think there are multiple films, and particularly I was just wondering whether you did did you shoot a lot more with the Mr. Panda? Because he is such a character. And I was also wondering whether you had, like you spoke of the chain, where actually the supply chain. I was just curious whether you had access to these people, whether you did some work with them, whether you shot with them. Thank you.
There's a question in the back there.
There's also a question here.
Hi, my name is Debjani, and first of all, the film was great, very insightful. But then I'd quickly summarize my question. Coming to it, I just want to know, being a student of law, I know that, drawing from what Debal Deb just said, that, you have to take this permission and that permission from various authorities and various institutions when you do such kind of research. So, we also, like, as students of law, study that the institutional factor. Am I audible? Yeah. So, as students of law, we also study that there is an institutional factor to doing these kind of research. So, you have to take permission from the National Biodiversity Authority, you have to take permission from other authorities, other institutions, where they do all big talks about, gene conservation and benefit sharing and all of that. But one theme of this movie, apart from sustainability, was also decentralization. So I would mostly like to know how then, when we see these institutions, really global institutions who are very much in bed with global capitalism, closing down on us, how can we talk about decentralization in this regard, in the matter of policy?
There was one question here.
No time? Oh, okay.
One hand there.
Maybe we can. Yeah, one hand had a question?
One there. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Professor Debal if any of the farmers who suffered because of growing cotton, if you have seen them personally, at least some of them trying to get back, trying to revert to growing millets and rice again. And the second question was, have you faced threats from the pesticide lobby?
I'll just take that quick question about what we shot because that's a short answer. So yes, PC Panda or Kappa Panda as the villagers have christened him very rightly, and he did go with cotton in missionary mode. We shot a long sit-down interview with him, and we've also been visiting his shop over 4-5 years, including now just 2 weeks ago, where this time actually he was talking about the dangers of herbicides. But yeah, we have a longer interview with him. On the supply chain, we haven't, we were also like shooting when we had some resources. As you can can see the entire film is shot outdoors because of its subject, and there are things that which in specific seasons which we need to portray. So we also shot it when we had resources. But the specific thing which also Sushma asked, she didn't see the market. We don't see that cotton being purchased. So most of the supply chain we have filmed, but not scenes around that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just respond briefly and to the question about the role of science. I mean, do we feed the global population? That question, and also the policy question. But before that, we also deliberately did not show, although we have some footage of the agri inputs supply chain, because it's the governments find it easiest to go after the people who are at the very bottom. And that is such a, it's such a farce of an exercise of regulating agrochemicals that we, as a conscious choice also, we decided not to, which is why that person's face is blurred, although he's not very happy about it. But we had to think a little ahead that, what are the ways in which state responds the next time there might be a controversy in Odisha about chemicals or, residues, etc., etc. So very briefly, because we are running out of time, none of these problems that you mentioned, whether it's salinity tolerance or drought resistance or are new. And Debal Deb is the best person to speak about the, Sushma had said in the very beginning, Debal Deb does know the names of all the rices. and he has saline tolerant rices, which he has conserved from the Sundarban deltas. So, I think it's a severe mistake to believe that these are problems for which we have to straight go to recombinant DNA technology and genome editing or whatever will follow that. Does traditional agro-ecosystem, ecological knowledge have all the answers? No. Is there place for science? Absolutely. The question is not yes or no to science. The question is who's driving the agenda for science, and whether science is starting from bottom-up problems. Because, and finally, and I'll stop here, we need more food was precisely why we went for the Green Revolution, even though there were opponents of the Green Revolution in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and thereafter. Why do we think that following that same logic will somehow get us out of the consequences in which we find ourselves today?
So, in answer to Sharad and this lady, yes, in Vasudha farm we do grow not only rice. Rice is quite very visible because the number is big, 1,480 varieties. But we also grow 30 different kinds of millets. 6 different varieties of ragi or finger millet and pearl millet and all of these different millets. 6 varieties of okra, 35 varieties of brinjal or aubergine, and different kinds of fruits and all of these. So it's a biodiverse farm. The problem is that I cannot focus on all the diversity of the nation on one single farm, whose size is 1.7 acre alone. Okay? And this is also not my property. I don't own the land. It's actually a community land given over by the people. I don't own anything. With that, I cannot expand. I mean, even rice cultivation is becoming a very big problem because every year the number of rice varieties increase, but the space doesn't balloon out, to accommodate all of them. So this is the biggest problem. But definitely we are aware of this, and at the same time, we also make different kinds of experiments, multiple cropping versus monoculture. So just to answer your question about this multiple cropping and about why is this the problem of agroecologists not being calculated and handed over to the generations. So is that and I always make this kind of thing that makes me angry when an agricultural scientist or agronomist goes to the farmers saying that you should diversify. Okay, after 30 years of giving the training that you should only grow single monoculture because it's a question of scale. So for 30 years or 40 years, they trained all these farmers, you should go for monoculture. Then now suddenly they come to the same farmer saying, you should multiply, you have to diversify. this kind of, because now this, the World Bank has changed its strategy. FDA, the FAO has said that diversification is the answer, and the fund is coming to that institution, and then the professor goes there, okay, diversification is the answer. Those people have been diversifying for 10,000 years. That's the history of agricultural production, food production. In the Koraput and Rayagada district where I work, I've been working for this last 20 years, one single farmer grows 22 varieties of rice, 30 different millets, and different other vegetables and fruits like banana and papaya and mango and all of these, and jackfruits, different varieties, on the same farm every year. In Nagaland, we have instances of 220 crops on one single farm every year. Not only food, it could be non-food like cattle fodder, medicinals, bamboo and other things like for structural properties and so. Who are we going to teach them? Suddenly this, the Green Revolution proponent who has been promoting, this is the scale that if it's just a small, 1/2 of an acre, is this much of production. If you make it 1 hectare, it will be this question of scale. That's the myth of this economist things. And I'm emboldened to say about this in economics because my great friend and great economist is sitting there as well, Sharat Lele. And we have shown that this is a fallacy because it's only for the monoculture. But when you compound this with the multiple cropping, the calculation is totally reversed. And this we have published in 2 publications a couple of years ago. One is that all over the world in agroecological studies, there are an umpteen number of experimental evidence that if you grow multiple varieties and multiple crops on the same farm, the total productivity, gross productivity is much higher than the monoculture of each of these crops. Okay? Now, unfortunately, all the results, the experiments have been done with one polycrop, that is say A and B combined, versus A monoculture and B monoculture, always. Okay? There's only one study by Grierson who made 3 crops, but in this case again, ABC, A monoculture, B monoculture, C monoculture versus AB and BC and AC, not ABC together. So I made for the first time and a combination of 7 crops together, 7 crops versus monoculture of each of these 7 in 8 replications, 8 different farms, not on my farm. And the result was, I myself couldn't believe, I was not prepared for that. All the other results were about 1.2 times higher to maximum double, that is 2 times higher, 200% increase. In this case, when I combined 7 crops together, which is a subset of about 20 crops in the indigenous society, indigenous farmers' fields there, it was 5.6 times higher than monoculture average. 5.6 times. This has been umpteen number of course, 8 replications, and this 7 crops actually indicates what would be the scale with 20 crops or 30 crops with the indigenous ones. So the modern agriculturists, agronomists have a long way to go and lot of things to learn from these indigenous societies simply because they have not been studied. So we simply assume or presume it's underproductive. The only productive thing is the Green Revolution model of monoculture. Now it's now again changed, diversification. Now diversification how? It's monoculture of this in one farm and monoculture of cotton in another farm, monoculture of this and so on. Is never on the same farm. Okay? Because the paradigm is totally changed, totally beyond their comprehension. So that's the main answer. And the last one I just mentioned. Yeah, sure. Yeah?
Have you ever been threatened by pesticides?
You've been a hero, but have you also been threatened?
Should I mention that? Well, threat to personally?
For the work that you're doing.
I should not, there could be a different session. Just two instances I'll mention. One is that Monsanto sent their scouts 3 times over to our farm to get hold of certain unique rice varieties. I am the last repository of those varieties. One is a variety, each variety of rice, each grain of rice, spikelet of rice, contains 3 grains of rice. Okay? 3 kernels. Ek ek dhan mein 3 chawal. Okay? This is an unique genotype. Recently, 2 years ago, we identified the gene also responsible for the ovary duplication of that particular variety, which is never found in any other modifier. It's a dream of genetic engineers to manufacture that kind of thing. That's why Monsanto sent 3 times over. And he was kicked out, and one of my, Dulal, you saw this, my assistant, he just made a physical violence to kick him out of this. They wanted to bribe him 10,000 rupees. That was 12 years ago. The other other question was that, about whether it was legitimate. At that time, it was left front government. And I had my 5 volunteers in 5 districts. And each of these volunteers were threatened by the police of the district to report to the police station. I said, you must not go there until they show you a paper showing exactly what the... I was also threatened. My mother, recently widowed mother, used to receive phone calls, threat calls. Madam, you have lost your husband recently. Now you are going to lose your son as well. Please take care. He should not do what he is doing. So I had to sit with my mother when I came back to my urban home, told my mother what I am doing, and I said that I'm not doing any of these things, bad, nasty things. And then my mother, next time she received the call, she said that if my son is also killed in this process, I'll be very proud for his motherhood. And you go ahead. So they stopped from that one. And this went on for, finally, one day I wrote a letter to Buddhadev Bhattacharya, who was not then the CM, it was Jyoti Basu's name. Buddhadev Bhattacharya was a police minister. So I wrote a letter to Buddhadev Bhattacharya, the CM, and copies to the 5 district inspectors of police individually, saying that if you do not stop this kind of harassment by your police department immediately, without any production of any documentary accusations, all this, I'm going to move this the court, human rights association, organizations in international, national, and I'm going to sue you in person, not only as a department, but as person. In the next day onwards, it's all stopped. Because nobody was in support. So I had to be very violent and very aggressive in that way. That's the only way. So that's one threat. But the other thing is not just threat, I just to share with you because the issue has come up. When I shared this with many of my friends, some of my friends said that Debal wants to hype the importance of his work. Therefore, he has to manufacture these cock and bull stories. So that went on.
Closing remarks from Vasavi on that?
It was just a question on decentralization, if it's possible or not. I think it's possible. I think over the past decade, many people have forgotten, including the current government, that agriculture is a state subject. And therefore, it is states that should decide what is appropriate and good for them. And we also know that crop planning and other planning should be on the agro-climatic zone basis. And therefore, it should be decentralized to those levels, even go to the sub-district level. And across the world, in some areas where they are trying to come back, contest industrial, this corporate agriculture, it is very small decentralization models that they are resorting to. So I think there is very high potential in that.
Good. Yeah. Anything to add, Chitrangada? Thank you. Yes. Yes.
It's not a question or a discussion, just sharing with you some important pieces of information. Is that I know some of you are associated with farmers, and there is at least one friend who's 2 friends who are farmers themselves. So they perhaps know. We are talking about this climate resilient, agriculture and all of these. The indigenous seeds are the best bet to climate resistance, okay, without doubt. So just giving an example of my own farm, of these 1,480 varieties that I'm growing every year, there are 26 varieties which are perfectly drought tolerant in the sense that after the transplanting, they don't need any more water at all for irrigation. They only one spell at the time of transplanting. No more water is required until yield. Okay. B, we have 16 varieties of rice which are salt tolerant. And salt tolerant is not salinity tolerance, moderately haline, all of this, but they grow in seawater. In seawater salinity. It's not 5% of this. C, we have 46 varieties which can grow in 10 feet deep water, flood tolerant varieties. And 2 varieties, unfortunately I couldn't gather more, 2 varieties which are submergence tolerance, which means it doesn't grow up with the rising level of water. This stays put underwater, and then after this, after 3 weeks of this water subsides, it emerges and then again gives off. This is submergence tolerance. So these are the magic varieties for which genetic engineers are spending millions of rupees for what M.S. Swaminathan termed gene mining. Okay. So they have to mine for these genes which are already there in these indigenous varieties. So I'm happy that I don't have to develop another one is to paint a lily. I already have those properties in these varieties and I'm growing them rather than developing another deeper green variety or of these, a more green revolution variety of this. So this is one. And the second is that not only the food security but also nutritional security. It's not just the starch of the rice. We have umpteen number of varieties which are published in 6 publications, international publications, where we prove that 86 varieties in my collection, there are many in other varieties which are not in my collection. 86 varieties contain 20 times higher iron than the genetically modified iron fortified rice developed by IRRI. So the highest production is 156 ppm in one variety from Bengal. And then similarly with zinc, copper, vitamin A, vitamin B12, B4 and so on and so forth. Last one is silver rice. I possess one single variety, the only variety in the world which contains silver in its grains. Yeah. That's the beauty of diversity. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Debal. Thank you, Chitrangada, Aniket, and Vasavi, and thank you, audience.